I always wanted to draw my imaginary creatures as realistically as possible, but also as quickly as possible. While these goals may seem contradictory, after many trials and errors, I developed a highly efficient method with detailed end results. I broke down the whole drawing process into stages based on various visual properties, similar to render passes known from 3D modeling. In this method, I follow a very specific order, drawing every stage on a separate layer. This allows me to make the creature more and more detailed with every step, and every stage is supported by the previous one, which helps me get into the flow. The stages are not random. In the real world, the final look of every object is a composite of various effects, and I applied this feature to my method. This turned out to be perfect for the process of designing a creature. I can design the colors, the 3D form, and the texture of the body separately. To optimize the process even further, I use a few simple brushes, some fair brushes, and I make the best of the smudge tools. To quickly add a texture look to the body, I use custom texture brushes based on photos. Sketchbook makes it really easy to create this on the fly. In result, it takes me about an hour to draw a creature this way. To make my creatures believable, I incorporate elements of real animals into their design. I do this by keeping a set of photo references next to me while drawing. For this concept, I prepared photos of lions, okapis, porcupine, and echidna. I want to use the pose of the lion and the colors of the okapi. I found these photos on Pixabay. First, I try to draw a miniature version of the creature. I focus on the general silhouette and the most prominent features using a thin brush. Keeping it small stops me from adding unnecessary details. Usually it takes me a few attempts to come up with a silhouette that I'm happy with. First, I try to capture the general feel of the creature, and then I define its anatomy in a simple way. This is probably the most important part of the process. Here I capture the idea in its most basic form. I enlarge the sketch to its intended size and lower the opacity of its layer. Then I create a new layer and draw a more detailed version of the sketch using the same thin brush. This time I focus on the muscles and the facial features, trying to not leave anything to guess. This isn't really line art, simply a more detailed sketch that I don't intend to keep in the end. I discovered that a sloppy sketch like this gives me more freedom in the detailing stage. I lower the opacity of the second sketch and create a layer below it. I take a thick, round brush and start adding colors without shading. I also use a textured brush to make the surface less even and more organic. I'm not overly precise at this point, I just define the basic color scheme. I imagine the colors as they would look in full light, but I try to avoid 100% white. It's reserved for highlights only. For now, I don't draw any patterns. They will slow me down. I add a new layer and set its mode to multiply. I paint the shadows now, keeping them fairly light for a natural effect. I discovered that warm-colored shadows work best for fairy creatures. This takes care of subsurface scattering of the fur. Again, I keep drawing pretty fast, not trying to be precise yet. My goal is to quickly define the 3D form of the creature. I merge all the layers along with the sketch and use a textured smudge brush to blend the lines into the body. This way I turn the lines into precise shadows quickly and effortlessly. This brush works like a textured blender. It blends the colors without smoothing them to match. I was pretty loose so far, but now it's time to slow down and take care of the details. I take my universal round brush and paint over the areas that look unfinished. I pick colors directly from the piece, not adding anything new. By keeping the brush small, I leave the original texture mostly intact. This is the longest stage, but after this the creature is almost finished. I avoided any patterns earlier to keep them from being blended at a later point. Now that it's no longer a risk, I can add the stripes that I borrowed from the okapi and the bands on the spikes, just like porcupines. I keep the pattern shaded by pressing lightly in the shadows and strongly in the light. The creature's shape is defined now, so I create a new layer and draw its outline with the inking pen. This default brush has a perfectly hard edge that helps me create clean selection. I use the magic wand to select the inside of the outline, then invert it and fill the selection on a new layer with the background color. This layer stays on top and covers everything outside of the creature. In Sketchbook, I can quickly load a brush with a texture taken directly from a photo. To do this, I paste a grayscale photo and capture the area that I want to paint with. I have created a special custom brush with settings adjusted to drawing textures, and I simply load it when needed. Such a loaded brush can be duplicated and saved to use later. To paint with a photo brush, I create a new layer and set its mode to either soft light for dark textures or multiply for bright textures. I paint the textures, controlling the size all the time. I don't want to flatten the body. Next, I use my texture blender to make the texture less consistent. Now I add specular light or shine. I create a new layer in screen mode and paint with dark blue to accentuate the shapes on the surface of the body. The smoother the surface, the brighter and sharper the shine. By adding big areas of undisturbed shine on the fur, I show that it's smooth like Okapi's body. This is the reason why I neglected the shadows earlier. I discovered that the shape of the surface can be shown more efficiently with shine. It also gives a more natural effect because in reality, shadows are usually weakened by ambient light. So when I shade the creature, I think of it as being underwater, and I add the missing shine in the later stage. If I have extra time, I like adding special effects like rim light. I add another screen layer and paint with dark yellow or orange to accentuate the edge of the body. This makes the whole artwork look a little more finished, despite it being sketched so quickly and loosely. Finally, I add shadows under the paws and some glow behind the body to create nice contrast. I may add some minor details like whiskers and smudge the edge a little to make it softer. I also use custom smudge brush to create an impression of long fur, or here the spikes.